focus that we had is this reliance on clean data. We had an awful lot of long conversations about how to handle the data and how to present it. So we had two choices to select for data sources. One of them is the Association of College and Research Libraries, a survey. The only problems with that is that it is optional. Not every library is going to be putting the data in every year, and access to it is proprietary and subscription. So not everybody has access to it. So we decided to choose the National Center for Education Statistics and using the IPEDS survey from 2006 to 2021. We focused mostly on the academic libraries portion of that survey. We also had to dip into the human resources portion of that survey to get full-time equivalency of librarians. The nice thing about NCES and the IPEDS is that it is mandatory. There is more explanation about the survey itself for those of you who may not be familiar with it on that link right there. So the data points that we took from IPEDS are total library expenditures, library salary expenditures, and expenditures as a percentage of library budget. We also looked at one-time purchases of books, serial back files, and other materials. This typically is the purchasing that we do for print material and stuff that libraries would own in perpetuity. We also wanted to take a look at the ongoing commitments to subscriptions, which tend to be more or less on the electronic side. We also looked at full-time librarian employees. That comes from the human resources portion of the IPEDS survey, and the FTE fall enrollment for the 18 WNYLRC academic library institutions. So we also decided to use Tableau Public as the platform to put our visualizations in. One of the many reasons why is that it's interactive. You can filter in and out institutions throughout pages. It handles larger data sets very well. And it is a multi-dimensional tool rather than just like an X and Y axis like Excel. And we're going to do a few demonstrations of the visuals that we have today in just a little bit. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Reed and talk about our first iteration. Reed?
Sure. Thanks, Chris. So this project started kind of as just a what-if scenario in one of our council's discussions of how could we find useful salary and budget data without dealing with the anonymity of data and all the confusion between the region of how different institutions classify their staff, be it librarians, staff, part-time clerks, all these other distinctions that vary from institution to institution. So when we went into this, my initial thought was, okay, let's look at the highest level possible and let's just say what percentage of budget is dedicated to salary, and we can mark that over a year. We can see the rate of change year by year and use that as an analysis point. And starting with that foundational discovery and just way to go forward, we went with that and we started building out and seeing what we could do. So first we had to figure out what we picked, and as Chris explained, we ended up going with IPEDS. IPEDS has an open data portal that is both very helpful and very clunky at the same time. It is not the most user-friendly interface, but once you get used to it and learn how to use it, it is very nice for extracting large data sets that are pretty easy to link across institutions. So one of the things we learned in the process was how to actually create savable institution files and variable files that we could re-upload back into the system to pull data for years as they get published. So we started this project. I think our most recent data when we started this was 2019, so we had to add 2020 and 2021 at the time. The reason this is really nice is not only can we use that each year to share our data, we can share that with other people who may be more data savvy to use the exact same variables and create their own insights out of it. So it is something that we can extend to other people who may have better data visualization or data manipulation skills. And the other thing that was really nice about this is we were concerned, because this is a 3-person group creating a project, if the 3 of us no longer are involved in WNYLRC for some reason, how do we train someone to do this and keep this project going? So that's why we moved to create, like, learning and creating these UID and MVL files so that someone can just use those files in the system instead of having to recreate it from scratch again with all the institutions and variables and try and reverse engineer what we had done. So as you go through the IPEDS portal, you can select specifically which data that you want to pull and which years you want to pull it from. And the report is generated creating a CSV download that we ended up using in Excel. So our initial thought was, let's take this dirty CSV Excel file, run it through pivot tables so that we can get really nice clean data, and then we can upload that into Tableau, or just create the visualizations directly in Excel. And this was a point of contention between individuals in the group. And the concern that was made with this is, first of all, it's another layer that we have to train. Secondly, it is now editing the master data file and can cause major issues if anything goes wrong in that. That means the data is now inaccurate or corrupted. And we don't have a second master file that we could compare it to. And that would be causing the problem of, then we have to get an individual to go back into IPEDS, extract all the data again, and then somehow get it to work through those pivot tables to work with the visualization tool that was reliant on this second manipulation area in the data. So what we did instead, after we had tested that, is we went back to, we take the raw CSV, we leave it as a master data file, and then we do all of our manipulation in a separate layer, which is the visualization tool, which is why we ended up going with Tableau public, because it is freely accessible currently and seems to be continuing. And it has a robust suite of visualization tools that is very comparable to the full suite of Tableau. And with the data size that we're using, because it can fit on an Excel sheet, we don't run into the same issues that you would have with maybe, say, like a live link to your ILLiad data or a live link to your LSP or ILS, which is dealing with much larger data sets. So this was a perfectly scalable solution that was free. Anybody could create a profile and access it. And you can have live links to Google Sheets or anything, so you're not actually beholden to a Microsoft Office suite to make this kind of information, to use this kind of stuff. So to do that was slightly annoying because the data comes in, it's not easily massaged into Tableau because the fields and the values are, what we noticed is there were like 3 variables along 2 axes that we were trying to deal with a lot of the time. And we had to figure out a way to clean it up. So what we ended up doing was a lot of digging into Tableau and seeing what resources were available and learning how to create calculated fields, merge things, and do a lot of other manipulation within Tableau. So our experience is that Tableau is where you end up spending most of your time learning. But our thought was, once the visualizations are up and running and built, to add additional data to those visualizations, all you have to do is update the table in Google Sheets, and it's good to go. The visualization will update with that new data. So what we do is we do a direct IPEDS export into Google Sheets, and it's already connected to the Tableau visuals that have been built out. So once that Google Sheets is refreshed and the Tableau public is refreshed, that data exists. So what we ended up building out was about 14 different visualizations, some in individual visualizations and some as a dashboard that linked with each other as you go from year to year or institution to institution, where you can see 3 or 4 different visualizations and representation. Jay will go later and actually show you what these look like. We focused on budget with total library expenditure, total library salary and wages, one-time expenditures, ongoing subscription expenditures. We were able to pull data from the HR portal of IPEDS to grab full-time library employee information, just the total numbers, the total library expenditures per full-time employee FTE students, total FTE students per FT librarian, and FTE fall enrollment per institution. So I talked about this earlier, and this is kind of where I have the most fun talking about is the experience and expertise that we had to make up for by learning Tableau and learning this whole project as a just like a novel experiment. We had all had varying experience with data. I wouldn't say we were completely new to the idea, but this was a really fun project to take. Okay, this is a data idea where none of the calculations are scary. This isn't going into data science. It's really just doing simple math with percentages and just charting change over time. How do we make this work in a system that we really haven't worked with before? How do we make sure that it is something that we can train others on? How do we document the data changes over time that happen in IPEDS so that everybody knows, even though the data is consistently recorded, it changes over time, and that changes our findings. So how do we make sure that that stuff is easily found by the end users? How do we go about sorry, lost my train of thought on the last one. Apologies, everyone. But yeah, we wanted to just make sure that this project is something that anybody could take up and really work with without feeling too worried about all of the other elements of data science that can get overwhelming and scary. Some of the things that we found in Tableau are really annoying is with creating calculated fields, you had to duplicate the process for each field that you were doing each time. So there were some tedious steps that we had to take to make sure that our averages and our sums and totals were coming through accurately without affecting the master data. So this was one of those things where it was a trade-off where to keep the data intact, we had to put a lot more work in on the Tableau side. And then regional averages and regional totals, we had to actually go back into the data file itself. And this was like a compromise because we couldn't find a way to get regional averages and regional totals to come through in Tableau. We ended up making calculated fields in the master file for that, so that it would come through accurately. And this has to do with the fact that we had institutions that we wanted to divide by and the year that we wanted to divide by. So we could do one or the other, but we couldn't do both in Tableau. So we had to create a regional average for institutions and for years coming from the master file. The other thing that's really annoying is the axis ranges, because of outliers, were very skewed because University of Buffalo compared to Damon College or Damon University would have much different budget realities. So it'd be in the million compared to the 30 million range. And the issues with that is that we couldn't narrow axes down to better show the data. For some reason in Tableau that didn't really work, so we weren't able to skew those. And then going back to the data itself, it's IPEDS itself is reported by individual institutions. It's impossible to know if those pieces of data are being collected in the same way. Every institution has their own reality of what they have available for analytics and reporting, and that directly impacts how they report what information they have about budget, total number of items, and things like that. It's only one of many analytical tools, and we were dealing with a lot of qualitative questions about full-time employees' experiences and what we're seeing, and trying to find like a quantitative way to advocate for librarians in a way that maintained anonymity to the best that we could, but still told a story. So this came through because some institutions may have one or two individuals staffing their libraries. And we had to deal with the idea that this might be exposing that data, but one thing about IPEDS is it's publicly reported, and all the public institutions publish salaries. So there is some type of buy-in by reporting IPEDS data to know that this information will come out into the public and be available. So we tried to make sure that we maintained anonymity to the best we could with our methodology of how we analyzed budget as a percentage dedicated to employee salaries. We made sure that we didn't have any collect any names or anything like that, and that's not even available on IPEDS. That would have to be a separate data source to find titles and roles like that. We also dealt with the fact that reporting periods are differed over time depending on fiscal year endings. Most places would end in July, but there were fiscal year endings for different institutions at different times, which would change how the budget would be reported for these. We also had issues and limitations within academic libraries, trying to decipher what the one-time purchases and expenditures versus ongoing commitments and subscriptions were. We wanted to know the budget allocations, but we couldn't really understand like how the LSPs and ILS were collecting the analytics, and if they differed based on what they could collect and what they couldn't. And we didn't have information on the grants and other funding sources that were coming into the library that we could use to further analyze what's going on. It wasn't broken down to see if it was like included within the budget or if it was auxiliary. Also, we found out that because the full-time librarian information was held in human resources, it was much less granular than what we could expect from it being reported from within the library. So we know that archivists are not included in the FT full-time librarian statistics, and we couldn't really glean specifically how they decided which individuals were considered full-time librarians or not. Some might be considered staff, some might not. So we didn't know if that was accurate reporting. We also know that there's missing data for certain years and certain institutions within our data set. And that comes down to if the institutions can or can't report each year. And then University of Buffalo just seemed to continue to be an outlier within the data, which we mitigated as best we could because we tried to make sure that most of our analytics were done based on percentage or trends over time, so that even though there are outliers, we can try and see what's happening from year to year. And then specific disclosures. So right now, one of the things that was most interesting about this project and what really got it going up again is once COVID hit, the group really kind of discussed and thought this would be a really good time to get consistent data continually reported to see what the actual fallout in the libraries and possibly in higher education was from COVID-19. So what were the pre-COVID realities as we had gone away from the 2008 financial crisis and built back up to another large hit nationally to GDP and all of the funding sources for libraries, see how that builds back up and see if there's anything we can do to advocate, saying these were our 2019 totals. Here we are in 2023, 2024. We haven't even hit that, and inflation is at X. So this is where we thought the advocacy piece might be really useful. The other disclosures we looked at total library salaries, wages include. So they do include student assistance and federal work study, which does significantly augment how we look at wages and salaries. Full-time and part-time librarians are included. Archivists are not included as a part of the full-time and part-time librarians, I believe. And the library technicians and clerks are not considered the full-time librarians. But you can get all of them in one pool of workers. But when you break out to the full-time librarians, it only includes librarians, but not archivists. Library salary information is compiled by librarians and full-time librarians. Employees compiled by HR. So this was the biggest issue we had. So we had to also get the regional average and regional totals manually into the master data, and then we had to remove all the fringe benefit fields that were grabbed because they were inconsistently reported and changed over time as well. All right. So what do we have next? What we want to do now is kind of look at what we've been able to accomplish so far and see if there's more methodologies we can use to represent the state of academic libraries. We understand the limitations with IPEDS as we, as a group, have tackled with it, but we are hoping to find more people with more knowledge or more insight into possible data that would work, that's open and freely accessible, maybe novel approaches to the existing data that we already have. We want to use other statistical values to represent it. We want to work with Tableau and other visual softwares to see if there's other easily accessible and easily usable ways to display data that might be more accessible to libraries of all sizes. We're really interested in trying to find salary equity within the region, making sure that our library staff are properly compensated and that we are trying to maybe work together as a region to have these more difficult discussions about how the use of funds in libraries can be distributed in a way that's empowering the people that work there, but also maintaining the proper collections and one-time and continuing purchases that need to be done. It's just one of the, it's one in a litany of other ways to help with having these tough budget discussions, and we hope this is a good advocacy tool. I'm hoping it's also something that is really guided towards state legislature and explaining to them the value of the libraries in conjunction with all the great things and projects that we're doing to show that we are dealing with trends that either that maybe show a deadweight loss between the amount of value that we can represent to the state versus the trends that we're seeing in budgets and in salaries. Also, we were interested in expanding this to talk more about collections itself. So physical volumes versus electronic volumes, we're interested in trying to look into how much material in the libraries can we gather through open data that is actually owned in perpetuity versus just subscription. And we're really interested to hear about ideas and concerns about this existing project and areas where we can move further into it. So for regional interest, we thought we would try and build it this way so that it would be something that could be replicated in other regions using the institutions that they serve. Just to see this data maybe expand a little bit more so we have more data points, more areas across the region that we can look to and see what's going on. We want to improve our data and visuals to be more helpful to everyone who would want to use them. We're really interested in new ideas and thoughts. Any other open data sets and surveys that anybody would know about are always ready for on the board, ready to for us to take on. We do also want to, because this data is only for academic institution libraries, if we can find a way to assist a group who's more knowledgeable on the public library side and how that information would be helpful, that would be a great place that we could expand our open data focus. And we're trying really just to use data as a tool for advocacy. And I mean, beyond that, even just if it solves small individual institution problems and that's available, we find that very valuable too. All right, so I will toss this back over to Chris to talk about the actual findings that we had when we did this project.
So we did list out a handful of just key findings that are primarily focused just on regional totals and regional averages. Keep in mind, as Jason will demonstrate for you in just a little bit, that you can look at individual institutions. The Tableau visuals are very good at being able to filter in and out. I did see a comment in the chat saying from Lydia saying, not sure if this data is available. I'm curious if analysis included budget percentage and salary data by community demographics. We didn't have any demographic information in there. I don't think that IPEDS, maybe with the exception of HR, would have demographic information. We might have to go to another source for that, but we are constantly looking for new ideas to improve this and build on it. So keep those ideas flowing. But I'm just going to take you through a few slides of just things that we came across. Read if you want to move forward. Also, keep in mind, as you can see in this data visual, the y-axis is flexible in Tableau depending on the data that you have. So right here you see what some people would refer to as a data duck because the bottom axis is at 15 million and the top is at 40. So we understand that it's kind of manipulating the visual to show the difference, but the numbers do speak for themselves. In the 18 academic library institutions in the Western New York region or in WNYLRC, expenditures have fallen over $6 million since 2017. You can see there's a big dip there from 2019 going to 2021, which we would suspect, at least anecdotally, that would have something to do with COVID. Next slide. Total regional library salary and wage expenditures have dropped 22% since 2010, from 20.8 million to 16.4 million. As you can see here, like I said, all of these visuals are discussing just the 18 academic institutions in the Western New York region. Despite a recent post-pandemic increase, one-time purchases, which we would like to say anecdotally are your print monographs that are owned in perpetuity and other material that is purchased, have decreased 54.7% from 2006 to 2021, from 3.1 million to 1.4. So this is one of those situations where we're seeing less and less print material being purchased throughout the region. And in the meantime, from 2006 to 2019, a reliance on subscription expenditures rose from 9.3 million to 13.7. And as a possible consequence of the pandemic, that number did recently drop over the last few years. Our suspicion would be obviously for budget savings during the pandemic. This is one of those situations that we would like to get more libraries involved in, especially on the public side. I believe Director Spears of the Buffalo and Erie County Public Library addressed the state assembly and talking about the collection for the public side of it, that 30% of it is not owned. So this is a trend that we're seeing with libraries. If your budget gets cut, your print doesn't disappear from the shelf, but your electronic licensing does. So this is one of those situations where our print reliance is dropping and our electronic reliance is rising. From 2010 to 2021, the FTE enrollment for the 18 WNYLRC academic institutions has dropped 22.9%. So this is obviously reflective of some of the stats that we've seen earlier, with lower enrollments means lower dedication of budget to libraries. From 2010 to 2021, I think we were just on this. Got to move forward. And I think that is the last of our visuals.
Yep.
Yeah, excellent. So I will hand it over to Jay if you want to kind of take them through the live website.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Hopefully you guys could see our website here. So for those of you who want to follow along, want to figure out how to do this yourself, we do have, as mentioned, a LibGuide that documents what we did. It has all of the documentation written that was produced by the person who originally harvested this data, plus a bunch of stuff that we have added in there. And that is conveniently linked from the very bottom of the page right here. You go to library staff salary survey, or if you go to WNYLRC.libguides.com/salary survey, you're going to come to here. This is where we have put basically an overview of everything that we have just discussed with you, our mission, our methodology. This is a list of the colleges that we actually pulled this information from to create these. A summary of our key findings, our disclosures and whatnot. But we also have here, under the second tab, the salary and budget survey visuals, is where the actual dashboard embedded in here lives. Up top, we have a lot of our information about how we did this, instructions on how to extract our data, the variable files that we use, the description of what those variables are. We have a link to the raw data that we got, and I think that includes up to 2021 data, might be 2022. And then a link to our public Tableau. But it also has the aforementioned dashboard down here. This also lives on Tableau public itself. I'll show you guys in a second, but this is the interactive portion of this that can be used for a lot of tools. Right now, we've got all of these tabs up here that present different metrics that you guys can sort through. Right now, this is a breakdown of the percentage of the budget dedicated to salary in 2021 across each of these institutions. This has some cool features here because you can change where you are looking. If we want to switch years, you can switch your years up here, or you can add and remove institutions that appear on this chart. So you can customize it and it will change as we go. We want to highlight a couple of these here. You can see it will highlight them. And we have all of our various metrics available for you across the top. Here is our total budgets. This is each year, the total expenditures about all of these for the region. But you can also break this out into an average. You can view individual institutions, and you can do that for each of these metrics that we've got up here. We have our percentage of budget dedicated to salary. This is the regional average. Just wanted to see what it is at ECC. here we go. Here's your chart of ECC's percentage of their library budgets that are spent on salary year on year. And we can manipulate those in different ways, but the main entry, which is our dashboard, shows you almost everything. This lets you choose which metrics you want to show, and this has everything available to you sort of at your fingertips. So you can see what's going on and then find areas where you can dig into the data and you can create that specific metric that shows what it is that you want to show. And then we have, this is our underneath our summary of our key findings as well. And these you can, again, change this here. Now we've got our regional expenditures, 2006 to 2021. This axis goes along here, but here you can see we have our total is much higher. And then we have UB, as mentioned, is our usual outlier, is messing with this data a little bit. But then if you want to compare yourself to like institutions, you can always remove UB. You can remove the regional total because that's the aggregate of all of the expenditures in a year. And now you have something that's a little bit more comparable. And you can select or deselect each of these at will to produce the visual that you guys would like to produce. And we have some convenient setups right along here. This doesn't only live in the LibGuide. This also lives in a visualization on Tableau Public. This is linked out right here. But this is essentially a larger version of what is embedded into our LibGuide. I think this is usually a little bit easier to manipulate because it's not in a frame. And you can do all of the same things. So you can see you've got all your metrics over here, your different years. You can do all of the same things on this side of it as you can in our embed. So part of this is producing this visual set of data that you guys can suit to your own purposes. And it's not just limited to this set of data. A large part of this was setting up the workflow so that we could analyze any consistent and repeatable set of data in a similar manner. We've thought of some ideas that we could pursue, but that's something where your individual circumstances really help inform what this could be and help improve overall how the Western New York region uses the open data that's available to us. We've got tons of data that is just out there for the taking, municipal data, this data right here that is gathered by government entities, that is gathered by other statistical aggregate companies, and it is out there, it is freely available, and it is set for people to do manipulations on. But that could be kind of an abstract thing. Ooh, we want you to take data and manipulate it and do things. But this is what we're talking about, is producing a visual that you can use to tell a story for your institution. You can compare it against your likes. You can compare it against ones that aren't like you. And every now and then you'll notice this is a live link. So this data will refresh, which is awesome because what we need to do behind the scenes is basically just add new data into a Google Sheet, set up a few things, and it will automatically populate, which is great for when you're doing things that are ongoing. It helps you set up a project that actually can be continued by a staff with a minimal amount of expertise, as long as you refer to our documentations on how to, and you refer to all the stuff we have here. And the only limit is what data you can get and what you want to do with it. So these are where these things live. If you guys want to poke around, you're most welcome to. This is why they are there. They are publicly accessible for you guys to fiddle around. The more fiddling around you do, the more familiar you'll get with these, and then the concepts in general that we're dealing with. I believe, unless anyone else has anything to add, that might be most of it. And we turn it over to questions, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, please feel free to put any questions in the chat. I also think that we have a small enough group here today that if it's easier, just go ahead and unmute yourself if you have any questions.
I have a question. So along the lower axis there, everything is displayed alphabetically. Can we change it to display highest to lowest or lowest to highest or something like that?
Yeah, the visuals below this dashboard can do that. So essentially what you would do is you could just limit to individual institutions and have it go year by year. I don't think this particular dashboard you'd be able to change it from highest to lowest, but you can at least you can actually manipulate the visuals to try to give you that idea of like who's the highest and who's not.
Yeah, I'm trying to think from a design point, I think that might be limited to something where like in creation we'd have to do it. Like Chris was saying, but we can also, I mean, if there's any interest in like rearranging these, we can probably have it display in a different manner. But if you go to institution breakdown, Jay, at the beginning one, yeah, this is where you would get the individual institutions that you can look at. But I think when you're comparing all institutions across each other, it's still alphabetical, and I'm gonna say no, but that's more out of ignorance than anything on the user side.
I have a question relating to that. I think if you did want that kind of visual, wouldn't someone be able to access the original data export spreadsheet and then create their own visuals sorted in a way that makes the most sense for their use?
Yes, absolutely. If you go back to the LibGuide, the WNYLRC Salary Survey 2023 IPEDS export, you can grab that and do any data visualization you want. The one thing I will caution is the data is not designed well to work with visualization tools that are not robust, because it's that having too many axes points that we want to compare at one given time. We had to do a lot of massaging to get it to work into Tableau. So this is a project that we built so someone could come in and continue to add to this project, but you would need some know-how to get a project going up from start. So if you're going to do that, just be prepared to have a couple of headaches and take some time with it. It's not a quick fix, unfortunately. But that's just the nature of the data that we were extracting. Also, I believe both those documents, the IPEDS variables upload file and the IPEDS variables for WNYLRC salary will help you with extracting it. And then the data extraction instructions above that, the PDF, we had a student that we hired to help us write out the actual steps. The reason for that was we were all too close to the data, so we didn't really know what the pitfalls or blind spots might be. So we wanted to bring a student in to recreate all these processes from scratch without any knowledge of data manipulation beforehand. And I think that helped us a lot more in creating a better training document. So one thing, if you are interested in this, please look at those instructions and let us know if they're confusing or not, because any feedback would be great. We are really happy to try and make this as easy as possible, because we were all scared going into data visualization when we first did it. So we understand the hesitance to try and do these kind of projects, and we want to make it as easy as possible.
Any other questions?
Hi, I guess I just want to say thank you so much for presenting this data. I think it's really wonderful and definitely something that I think a lot of people throughout the state would be super interested in replicating. It also seems like something that's really like New York to me. Just thinking of like the ability to pull all of that data that is public, I think is really significant and I don't know, just like interesting thing to kind of think about. And I guess that kind of leads me to I mean, I guess, it's sort of like any research you do, like the end user can choose to do what they want with it. But I'm curious, like what kind of outreach strategies or like community connections, how can we put this in practice to actually, make our workplaces better for everybody, I guess. I mean, it's a huge question, but because I think that's the goal of this, right? Like is to I guess it just makes me think a little bit too about, like, I know you're talking about stuff like back to 2006, but I think that these are also issues that have been with us since the beginning of the profession, and that have always disaffected marginalized communities with under budgeting resources, depending on anyway. So I guess that's it. Like how can we take action or collaborate and do some more strategic outreach?
I'll add one thing and then I'll hand it over to Chris because I think he'll have some very good answers on this too. So my experience with trying to find a link between, because I mean, I'm in an academic, so it's very specific, is finding student success and comparing it to libraries has always been near impossible. There's way too many factors to go into it. We've had like the Office of Institutional Analysis try and run these very complex statistical analysis that are well above my mathematic knowledge. And we've come up with nothing. And I think that's where we're failing. We just need to take the simple data that we have that everybody can understand and just bring it to the same avenues that we've done. Because I think data informs decisions and telling those stories are just helpful. It gives us a little bit more teeth to what we're saying. But the biggest jump that we're trying to figure out is like, we have this great data, but how do we tie it to all this great stuff that we're doing? And I think it's just sharing that qualitative analysis with the qualitative stories and all the projects that we're able to do with this quantitative data, saying, well, somehow we're still able to do this when we're seeing things falling. So if we just invested like X much more, we might see so much more out of this and things like that. I think it's creating narratives that would be good. And I challenge like anybody in these regional like areas that has the ability to or consistently talks with legislatures or other vested interests to start thinking in these ways. It's like, well, data's out there. We might be able to find something novel that actually supports these things that we've been saying for a long time that might sway a legislator who's like, well, I've heard this a billion times, but now I at least have numbers I can take to someone. So that's what I'm thinking for this, is just like, I don't know if it opens up new doors, it might, but as like, for Chris and myself, I think we're a little bit insulated because we are librarians at specific institutions, so we don't have the same connections that regional councils might. And we're just trying to start the legwork to say, these might be better ways to advocate, but we don't know. So that's why we're trying to get more people to buy in. And these kind of questions are the ones that we're really looking for, is, yeah, that higher, like, what do we do with this now? So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Reed, you just hit the nail on the head with that. I mean, I think that is the goal, is to try to put some visuals and quantitative analysis to the stories that we've had for a long time and use that as an advocacy piece. I think the next spot, or at least the next step for us, I think, is to try to, and it might sound lofty, is to create a focus group that includes a number of different regions, and to start asking those questions, Lydia, that you just did in the chat earlier, and start to get an idea of what would be meaningful for us as a solidified group to provide data for advocacy. And there's also what and this is kind of at the very beginning of this project. I mean, I know we have something to present here and it looks like it's finished, but we wanted this to continue going. But we also had a lot of concerns when we first started creating these visuals. So if you you could take this visual and say, well, my institution spends by far and away the least amount on percentage of salaries to theirs. So, and you could use that as an advocacy piece for your, university or college administration. But on the flip side, you might be an institution that's actually using a lot more or having a better budget, and that could be used against you, similarly to how we've often used and compiled textbook affordability data that publishers have now turned around and used that against us to create inclusive or automatic billing programs. So these are the ideas and the discussions that we want to have. So our idea is to create like a focus group to start talking about it and roll it into a bigger advocacy piece at some point.
Any other questions or comments?
I have one last question. Is anybody in this group working with Easy Proxy Analytics to answer questions that Reed was asking about student success and libraries and et cetera?
We are not, and we would be interested in that. I just don't have the knowledge of like the Easy Proxy Analytics, but having that kind of information and finding a way to do it regionally across those 18 institutions and collecting it would be a great addition to this. Usually the issue that we've had with a lot of this data collection is we have to get buy-in from all the institutions to want to share that. But I mean, that would be a great idea like that. I really like that idea. So maybe we can push forward and see how feasible that is. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, we are not. I don't. Our current version of Easy Proxy, I don't think supports the type of analytics that are that you would need to do that kind of project. We have thought an awful lot of trying to put some numbers to student success as far as the library is concerned, but unfortunately, we really just don't have that kind of granular data of usage, at least who's using it.
Anyone else?
I mean, I guess this is just like more discussion-y question, but what Chris was just saying about first of all, I guess Melissa, like I'm gonna follow up with you about Easy Proxy Analysis. That sounds super interesting. I don't know. I mean, in Northern New York, I guess we could do that for, I don't know, we'll see what we could do. Anyways, but I guess the question, or it's more about like the idea of like tying usage to success or something. It made me think about like some other stuff I've been reading from like library advocacy about like advocating for the labor in libraries, and like just because somebody like goes to story time, I guess, doesn't mean they're gonna vote for the new budget of the library. I don't know. So yeah, but I think the budget percentages and like the kinds of pointing out like subscription, or like that we maybe like don't have autonomy or like ownership of like 30% of our collections is super important to think about when we're thinking about like banning, like this is, I think it's related to intellectual freedom. And so like, I don't know. I want to have that conversation more and more with more people. So thank you for putting this together, and hope we can continue.
Yeah, and I think, oh, go ahead, Reed.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, yeah, we don't see this as like the only discussion that we want to have on this. This is really trying to get more people in so that we can continue these discussions and just flesh this out to be more useful, because yeah, when you only have 3 people working on it, you can only account for so much. So this is the kind of stuff that we're really excited for. And thank you so much for offering feedback as a group, because this is gonna help us, and hopefully we can get some of the people in here may be more in contact so we can keep building this out.
And I'd just say, please, if anybody here is interested in, just having these furthering these discussions, feel free to email any of the three of us. This is something that we're eventually going to try to, we're eventually going to send out an interest form and just see what's out there. There's plenty of narratives that libraries and librarians have been talking about for years that that have put us in some precarious situations. And one of the things is especially looking at ebook licensing and how that has become a big challenge. And we're hoping to kind of create more of advocacy towards moving towards more of a first sale type of model with ebooks rather than having to license them every year. But these are discussions that we'd like to continue to have, and we would like to have more quantitative backup to these discussions in the future.
I think that'd be great, Chris. And, whenever you're ready to put the call out there, we will make sure that it's shared with all of the other councils to share with their members as well. I think this could go, really far and grab a lot of statewide attention and get some, really great people involved that can make this, even better than where we're already at. So thank you so much for today's presentation. Does anyone else have any comments, questions like to share? I will send a link to the recording and a copy of the slideshow to everyone who's here today. So expect to receive those likely later today or tomorrow. And if you have any questions, of course, please reach out to any of our presenters or myself and I can connect you with them. All right. If we're all set, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.